Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, joined by that guy, Vince Adair. I'm getting really good at this, Vince. And today is special edition because today is my last day from my Virginia Beach studio. Road. I'm driving back here tonight, and of course, the next time you see me, I'll be back in my Granger, Indiana studio.
So, nice.
Vince, we're going to talk a little bit about Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly's press conference from today, the comments that he made. There's some interesting comments, some nuggets that we will discuss, and then we'll talk a little bit about the weekend of college football. And we're going to do it a little bit differently because we're going to talk about the games, and it was another crazy weekend. What it means for Notre Dame, because I think a lot of the move on to next season comments are being made by people who aren't paying attention to what's happening everywhere else in college football right now. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's first dive into Coach Kelly's comments. And, of course, he had a lot to say about the quarterback situation. So if you didn't watch, and I'm actually people who did watch, I'm curious if you had the same takeaway that Vince and I had. But essentially it was, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. Even though the rotating quarterback thing has never actually worked, in both times that Jack Cohn came off the bench and led the team to fourth quarter rallies were just like late in the game against Toledo. The other one was against Virginia Tech when Tyler Buchner got hurt, and then the other time Jack Cohn had a great second half since the opener against Purdue. It was a game where Tyler Buchner was hurt, and it was Jack Cohn's baby. Right. So they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And it's going to be Jack Cohn as the starter, which, I mean, as you know, I don't have a problem with, but it's still going to be playing Tyler Buchner. So no matter what Jack Cohn does, if he's struggling and needs to get into a rhythm or is in a rhythm, they're going to get him out of rhythm and keep putting Tyler Buchner back in there. And it doesn't sound like it's going to be like what we've discussed as like a red zone package or anything like that. It's just going to be, we're putting Tyler Buchner in to run the offense.
And that's a problem. And he said, Jack Cohn's the starter. He gives us the best chance to win. But we're still going to get Tyler in there, and we're going to keep expanding his role. That's basically what he said, and that tells us nothing.
Like, we hope Tyler Buchner is ready to give us the best chance to win by the end of the year. It's kind of how I took that.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I just don't know how to take a lot of the stuff that he says, and it's the same message every week, and it's the same confusing message every week pertaining to the quarterbacks.
Well, I believe every word he said because that's exactly what they've done up to this point in time in the season.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, and it's frustrating because it makes no sense to me, and it just seems so obvious to do it a different way. And then Drew Pine's name wasn't even brought up.
Initially, he kind of talked about him later as if we need someone to kind of come in,
and the other guys will cheer him on.
It's so obvious he has no faith in Drew Pine.
So anybody that thinks Drew Pine is going to play, there's going to have to be 2 injuries for that to occur. I mean, that's just a fact.
Well, one, I still don't think they would fully turn it over to Tyler Buchner. I don't. And if they did, and then Drew'd have to come off the bench. I mean,
I feel like that's what they
can't
did,
possibly watch the Virginia Tech game and think that Tyler Buchner's ready for 4 quarters. And again, I love Tyler Buchner.
They tried.
I wrote an article. He is the future.
Yes.
I think he's ahead of where I thought he would be. And I'm excited for the future with him at quarterback. But this ain't the future. This is the present.
Yeah.
And the present is he's not ready to be a 60-minute guy. And really the only time they've used Drew Pine this year is when Tyler Buchner wasn't really available and wasn't 100%.
That's true. That is true because he was still nursing a hamstring.
Against Cincinnati. He was out against Wisconsin and then was still not 100% against Cincinnati and had played poorly up to that point in time against Cincinnati. So.
Right. Yeah, good point.
So it'll be interesting, but hopefully, now the flip side of that is the hope is that as Tyler Buchner does get more experience, that he starts playing better because he is a dynamic player. I mean, it is so obvious that he's a dynamic player. We saw against Virginia Tech that when he is comfortable with his reads and getting the ball out on time and everything's and he's comfortable with what he's seeing defensively, he throws some really good balls. I mean, kid went 5 of 8 for 101 yards and a touchdown in a quarter of football against Virginia Tech. Now, second half, 1 of 6 with 2 picks.
Right.
So those things we'll learn, but I'd have to imagine that the more Tyler plays, the better he's going to be. Because what was the only knock that we had on him, Ben? The only concern that you and I have about Tyler is he doesn't have a lot of experience.
Right.
He's
Lack of
playing
experience.
high school football.
Yeah.
Forget college football. He doesn't have now. And Brian Kelly was doing his normal. We're not a very experienced team. Our margin for error is really thin, which drives me absolutely up a freaking wall because like you're not the only team that lost players this offseason. Do I need to count how many 5th and 6th year seniors and 4th year seniors you have in your rotation? But that's a different story. But I think that with Tyler, my concern, Vince, was he just hasn't played a lot of football.
Right. And for him, that's
yes.
legit. Like that excuse is legit for him because look, he played exceptional football his junior year, but it was against less than exceptional.
I don't really care.
Which
I mean,
no.
Score 81 touchdowns. I don't care who you're playing against.
I'm with you 100%. I was good. What I was going to say was he played a great junior year, and he was even upping the competition his senior year, and then COVID hit. Right, so it's not his fault. He did everything
and
he
could. Missed his sophomore year because of an injury.
Because of an injury. So he's played 1 year of high school football.
He's going to be really good.
He's going to be really good, but people have to pump the brakes with him a little bit.
Especially the head coach and the offensive coordinator.
Well, that's a fact. No doubt about that.
The other interesting thing, Vince, Tyler James asked a really good question.
From the Tribune.
You want to kind of bring that up because I thought it was – I mean, he just went bam right at it.
Well,
it wasn't an attack. I mean, it was just
it
was an extremely well –
No, it was on it. So I'm sitting at lunch and I'm eating with my wife because it's our day off. It's fall break, and I go to a different school corporation than my children, and so it's just the two of us, and it's glorious. And so we were eating lunch, but unfortunately we were eating lunch with Brian Kelly because I had to have the press conference on in the background. And I'm talking to my wife, and I hear Tyler James ask the question. He basically asked, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it was, hey, during the bye week, when you were self-scouting,
because Brian Kelly talked a lot about all the self-scouting,
and he said the word self-scouting, by the way.
Super happy to hear.
Absolutely.
By the way.
He goes, and he basically said, during the self-scouting, did you take a look at when Jack was super successful at the end of games, and did you want to apply that to the way you're doing the offense, or is it more of a fact that he just needs to do everything else better? And Brian Kelly's answer was basically little bit of both is what he said. And honestly, it's the right answer. It's the right answer, in my opinion, because I think that it is a little bit of both because you can't be in 2-minute all the time. Okay. You can be in it a lot, and there's certain things you can do. Don't get me wrong. But he also has to do some of the things that they normally do,
which we've talked about.
He does.
Right.
That's legit.
I didn't like the answer, though. I'll be honest, because I don't think anyone's advocating for them to go 2-minute all the time. That like to me,
ignorant
it's kind of
people
like
are
saying that. I haven't heard anyone say that.
Okay.
And I've heard some really dumb things on Twitter. I haven't heard that.
Okay. Fair enough.
What I believe, however, is that there are principles we're seeing from that. But again, those principles also apply in the second half against Purdue and in the first half in the third quarter against Florida State. I mean, you go back and watch the first drive against Florida State. It's not 2-minute. They were kind of going with a little bit of a tempo. I mean, they were getting the ball snapped at like 18 to 20 seconds in that drive. 4th and 1, right? Drop back to throw. 3 receivers to the left, tight end to the right, running back to the right. They did an empty free release, corner route, like little it's sort of a unique smash type of look. It wasn't smash per se, but it was that kind of concept. 4th and 1, bang, Michael Mayer open, hit it, get your drop, get the ball out, touchdown. We saw that in the third quarter as well, if you remember. They were kind of pushing that tempo on that first drive. I think first or second play hits Kevin Austin on a go route, comes down, hits him again, and it was just like they were really going after Florida State, and they went after. Those weren't 2-minute situations. So he is correct in that Jack, but we've also talked. Jack has to play better.
Yes,
Jack has to handle the pressure better. The reason I didn't like the answer is he kind of started talking about like he was almost like dismissing what Jack has done. Teams aren't pass rushing as much because they're chasing Tyler Buckner around. I don't remember Toledo chasing Tyler Buckner around a ton that game. I mean, he played like 4 series. But then, Virginia Tech, they definitely were. But it's kind of like, teams kind of don't pass rush as much at the end. You mean when you're in a hurry up and you're getting the ball out quickly, teams don't pass rush as much? Yeah, hey, that's a principle that applies for 60 minutes, not just
absolutely
the last 2 minutes.
Right.
But there is some validity to the notion that, look, if you're just looking at it from a 2-minute standpoint, No, it's not the same as doing in the first quarter, but that's not what I'm advocating for. I know that's not what you're advocating for, and I haven't seen anybody advocate for that. It is spread the field. And we'll get more into this when we talk about what we saw in college football this weekend.
Right.
The fact that Tennessee has a freaking better offense right now than Notre Dame's.
Well, most college programs
so yeah. But we'll get into that.
Just saying.
But it just
what I watched this weekend.
He kind of talked about, like, he said both, but then he poo-pooed the notion of both and focused more on Jack needing to play better, which is true. Jack needs to play better. That was my issue with the question. Is he said both, but then it's like you say that, but then the rest of the things coming out of your mouth don't make it sound like both. And then they start talking about how we got to continue improving the run game. And it's like they're talking about moving Michael Carmody to tight end now.
Yeah. Well,
if you put Michael Carmody on the field as the sixth lineman instead of Logan Diggs or Chris Tyree,
that's what they're going to do. He brought up 13
Lorenzo
personnel.
Styles or something like that. I'm going to lose my freaking mind.
They're doing it. It's happening. It's happening.
It's insane.
Because you brought that up, I'm going to hit Brandon's super chat here because it kind of pertains to Michael Carmody. Says, and thanks, Brandon, by the way, for the super chat. He says, now that Kristofic is starting at guard, if Kane doesn't...
The other bit of news, by the way, is Andrew Kristofic's going to be starting at guard.
And which I totally missed. I was just looking at the depth chart that they sent out, and he's not listed as the starter because they just keep repeating the same depth chart over and over.
Another reason I tell people don't pay a lot of attention to the depth chart.
But anyway, it says, now that Kristofic is starting at guard, if Kane doesn't step up his game, what do you think the chances are we see a healthy Carmody take over at the other guard spot? Well, apparently, since he's now going to be a tight end, I don't know that the chances are all that good.
There none. There are none.
I mean, you have a better chance of seeing Rocco Spindler at right guard, right? Than Carmody.
If you're Rocco Spindler right now, and you've watched this absolute travesty that's happened in the first 6 games of the season, and you're thinking, I'm not even good enough to get a snap with those guys, with that going on in front of me. So yeah, they're gonna because so Kane Barong is out for the year with a knee injury.
Correct. MCL.
Kevin Bauman is still out for a couple weeks, and Mitchell Evans is suspended for the first half of the game against USC.
Correct.
So instead of saying, hey, you know what?
This is our opportunity.
We went 20 and 11 personnel on Saturday. We looked pretty freaking good. When we went 11 and 20 and 21 personnel against Florida State, we looked pretty good. But let's keep trying to force feed 12 and 13 personnel on people. This is what I wrote about this weekend is their insistence on forcing the run game as opposed to what we've talked about, reverse engineering the offense to say, hey, we're going to spread the field and throw the ball, which is then is going to make the offense better, the run game better. They're still doing the same stuff. So you're going to go with Michael Carmody at tight end. And gee, what does that say to the offense, to the defense? Hey, by the way, see this guy wearing some junk number? We're not throwing him the ball.
Right.
So you don't have to defend that guy.
Right.
So now there's 7 guys you don't have to worry about because the quarterback being the other. Now we're down to 4. Okay, are they going to keep the running back in the pass? But it's the same old, same old. And that was kind of why, you hear good things about self-scouting. And then when he got into specifics of the side that was going to make actual changes, he kept talking about the defense.
I know. He brought up the D. I sat down with Marcus.
The Notre Dame defense more than he will the offense, and it's been that way all year.
Yeah,
it's the craziest thing. I mean, I don't know what you're watching, Coach, but that's the only reason you're 5-1 is that side of the ball.
100%. Marcus Freeman should be getting a raise right now. But hey, man, thanks for keeping us in the conversation. Hey, send me a memo. Let me know what you're working on here during the bye week. I'll get with you at the end of the week. Like that's about the conversation that should have happened between Brian and Marcus. Hey,
why don't you go ahead and work on that other side of the ball that can't score and keeps turning it over and it's making us have to be make these red zone stops all game to hold teams to turn to field goals when you give them the ball. And
if I'm Marcus Freeman. And I have to sit down, with Brian Kelly, and he starts going over all the things that I'm doing wrong or that the defense is doing wrong. I'm like, am I being pranked? Like, are there cameras in here? Is this like, when's your meeting with Tommy? Is this occurring? I don't know. I'm just shocked that conversation took place. Look, I have no problem with the head coach talking with the defensive coordinator about things they need to improve on.
And we're kind of being sarcastic about.
Yes, we are. I have no problem with that. That's his job as the head coach because no side of the ball is perfect.
Right.
Okay. And
the defense does need to get better.
It does. We've talked about it. We've not been shy about talking about the defense. But at the same time, that doesn't need to be your leadoff man in the press conference either. Like there's a fine line. There's a fine line.
We're going to keep doing what we're doing offensively.
Right.
But man, we got to make some changes on defense.
Right. That's where I have the problem. Okay. Like,
I mean, sometimes if you can't laugh, you just cry.
Oh my God.
I gotta laugh. He did talk about some things in the run game that I thought were interesting, talking about, the fact that they need to do a better job of sort of the nuances of the run game. He talked about, running counter, and if there's a blitz and there's a guy unblocked, do you take that guy or do you run by him? I mean, those are definitely things that they need to get better on.
Legit.
But it also, again, it sounds like they're just doubling down on who they are, as opposed, because this is what I said last week, and this is going to determine whether or not Notre Dame can run the table or not, and look like the team they should be. You've got to stop trying to be who you want to be and embrace who you are.
Bingo.
And build around who you are.
And that's what self-scouting is for.
Correct. Not like, hey, we're going to continue to be this, but we'll find out if that changes or not. Because again, this could just be Brian Kelly saying things ahead of a bye week in order to keep USC off balance.
Which honestly, if in retrospect, if that is what is occurring and this is what happens in that press conference and we see something different, I have no problem with
Great
that.
job, Coach.
I want to be very clear on that.
That's part of the games that you play in football.
Absolutely.
100%.
Because somebody from USC is watching the press conference to see if there's something they can get out of it.
The reason I don't necessarily believe that's true because
agreed.
We've been covering Brian Kelly for 12 years.
Agreed.
But it's always nice to hope and pray and wish.
It is. I'm a faithful person. So
there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. So those are kind of the takeaways that I got at today's press conference, Vince. What was offensively about the quarterback stuff. I think that if they're going to keep doing that, my hope is that Tyler Buchner, it's the light. Because I'll tell you this: when the light goes on, for him, he's going to be really good. Yeah.
Well, and it's similar to what we were talking about with the offensive line to a degree. I'm not saying that they're going to be at an elite level when the light goes on, but like last week for the offensive line, it's no longer pitch black in the room. Like there's a light under a bushel someplace where we're getting a little bit of ambient light, right? Mm-hmm. And which is good. And that's where he was talking about doing some counters and some things like that. Before, I would have laughed in his face. Like, you can't, if you're not getting any kind of push, if you're not getting any, you can't run counters. Like, that is never going to happen. But now, okay, we can have that conversation because you are getting some push and he's talking about being assignment correct. Okay, we can have that conversation because you are getting, some firing off the line and some things like that. I'm fine with that. It's the same thing with Tyler Buchner. There's going to be flashes of brilliance that we've seen in the pass game, in the run game, all of that. But there's also going to be some like, wow, I can't believe he made that decision. And that's not going to change overnight, especially if he continues to get a massive amount of reps, whatever that looks like. But if we're having this conversation 365 days from now, I think we're having it. Tyler Buchner looks like a completely different dude.
We'll find out which one it is. My issue, however, is when you're rolling with two quarterbacks, you need to practice two quarterbacks, which means neither of your quarterbacks who need to improve are getting enough reps to improve as much as you need to. So that's kind of my thing.
Well, Brandon Clark's getting reps. Brendan Clark.
Yeah, he did say that.
Which I thought was interesting.
So either Drew Pine is now. See, here's the thing. That could be because they're throwing Drew Pine on scout team this week, which I think if I'm Marcus Freeman. Last week on Monday, I go up to Brian Kelly and I'm on my knees begging him to let me have Drew Pine this week. Similar body type to Keaton Slovis, quick release, get the ball. I mean, this is an offense that is catch and throw.
Absolutely.
And Drew Pine can catch and throw and accurately make decisions. I think this could be a week where putting Drew Pine down on scout team is something that'd be great for the team. And I think it'd be good for Drew because it lets him get work. Being a scout team quarterback in a week like this for a team that's just going to throw a ton, it's actually something where if you're not the starter, that's where you kind of want to be because you're going to get work.
Right.
You're going to throw the ball a ton.
Well, and they said Clark was doing 7-on-7 against the defense. which okay, he's got a really strong arm. Like we've talked about that plenty. He has got a rifle attached to his shoulder. So, it's just the accuracy part, which the lack of accuracy. And again, things could have changed since the last time I saw Seven throw a ball. Okay. But the lack of accuracy from Brendan Clark, I don't know that helps you against USC because it's incredibly accurate throws, short, on the move, that kind of stuff. So, And Searcher Green asks, Clark is back with a question mark. He's on his way back. They said they're trying to get the rust, shaken off of him, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Vince, that's it for what we've seen from Notre Dame.
Correct.
So, obviously, we've talked a lot about what we need to see. I don't want to kind of rehash the same things over and over again. We're now at kind of a wait-and-see mode, and we'll have plenty to talk about the rest of the week. I want to talk about this crazy weekend of college football, which is sort of like a common theme now.
Yeah. Every week, something just like nutty, crazy. I mean, and it's not just one game generally. It's multiple games over and over. And I can think of two off the top of my head that were nutty crazy that I watched.
Yeah. Well, my dad and I were talking this morning, and we started talking about how many teams ahead of Notre Dame lost? And I was like, only 2. But it's like we were surprised it was only 2 because it seems like every week, like 3 top 10 teams are getting beat.
And Notre Dame doesn't move at all.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, nor should they at this point.
It doesn't matter.
So when I looked at this weekend, Vince, I'm looking at it and I'm saying people that are ready to write this season off and play for next year because this team can't win.
Stop.
This team, as it's playing coming into the bye week, is not a playoff team. It's not.
Agreed. I don't want them to be.
What I am saying, however, is if they can make some of the necessary adjustments, I do want this team in the playoff because there's like one great team right now. Georgia.
Yep.
And Alabama's beatable. Not the way Notre Dame is playing right now. Again, there aren't a lot of teams.
You're saying beatable in general. Like
in general.
Yes.
Yeah, I told you that before the season that Alabama was going to lose a regular season game. I said it before the year. I said Clemson was going to take a step back. I said, if you're going to beat Ohio State, beat them early. I mean, except for Miami, who I thought was going to be better this year, I've kind of nailed a lot of these.
Well, we predicted chaos, but no one could have predicted.
It's been even more than I thought.
Yeah, right.
And that's my thing is like, if you're Notre Dame, you just got to keep winning and start winning a little bit more impressively because
absolutely.
It's like, okay, so there's Notre Dame is 13th. Now we don't know where they're going to be when the committee comes out with the playoff vote. But between now and then, there's
isn't it usually like in the middle to the end of October?
Usually late October, early November.
Oh,
okay. It's coming out. And actually, as we're talking, I can kind of look it up.
That's fine. Sorry, didn't mean to get you off on a tangent.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So to me, when I look at it, I mean, if you think about it too, I wrote an article this weekend, and it was kind of looking at everything that's happening. So like, let's just say hypothetically that Notre Dame is 13th if the poll was going to come out. Let's say they are 13th, right? Well, if you look at it, so 3 of the team, there's 4 Big Ten teams ranked ahead of them, and they all play each other to some degree.
Right.
I think if Notre Dame keeps winning, they're going to pass Iowa. They shouldn't pass Iowa right now because Iowa has a better resume right now, and I know that makes some Notre Dame fans a little salty, but their 6 wins are over teams that have a combined 21-16 record, and they've won those 6 games by 111 points. Notre Dame's 5 wins are against teams that have a 15-16 overall record, and their 5 wins are by a combined 51 points. They have a clearly better resume. They both played a 3-4 MAC team. Notre Dame won by 3. Iowa won by 23. However, I think they're going to fall back. I think they're going to at least lose one more game. They're probably going to lose the Big Ten championship game. But then you've also got Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State are all ranked ahead of Notre Dame. Well, none of them have played each other yet. Like all 4 of them are going to play each other.
And they've all somehow played the other end of the Big Ten.
Yes,
up to this point.
It's not possible for at least 2 of them to have 2 losses. I mean, they all have to lose at least 1 or 2 games. At least 2 teams have to lose a couple games in that stretch. Everyone's going to have most likely a loss in the East when it's all said and done. I don't see Michigan State and Michigan winning all because it's only possible for one of those 4 teams to be undefeated at the end because Ohio State and Penn State already have losses. Michigan and Michigan State are undefeated, but they play each other.
That's right.
So unless one of them beats everybody else plus their rival, so there's going to be some Big Ten teams are going to fall.
And of course, Michigan has to play Ohio State. I mean,
right. What's I'm saying? They all four play each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
right.
So what I was saying is, like, if Michigan or Michigan State beat Penn State and Ohio State, then the winner, the team that does that, also then has to beat the rival.
Right.
That's the only way you can have an undefeated Big Ten team. The odds are really good right now. You're not going to have an undefeated Big Ten team.
Yeah, I think they're all going to knock each other off.
Correct.
I do. I don't see anybody making it out of there unscathed.
Oregon's already knocked off Ohio State for a loss. Now, again, that doesn't mean that Ohio State shouldn't be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. They should be.
Right. Agreed.
I'm just making the point that right now there's a lot still to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you look at the Big 12. Right. I mean, the ACC right now, there's one undefeated team in the ACC and only one other team with one loss. Everyone else in the ACC now has at least 2 losses. And I don't see Clemson, no matter what they do, I don't see Clemson passing a 1-loss Notre Dame team. Wake Forest is undefeated. They still have to go to Army, who's 4-2, to North Carolina, who's 4-3, to Clemson, who's 4-2, and to Boston College, who's 4-2. NC State's 5-1. They're ranked behind Notre Dame. Now, they have some games coming up where they could jump Notre Dame, but again, I don't see it. So the ACC's basically out, and it will be out soon.
I think they're out completely, to be honest with
you. If Wake
Forest
Forest runs the table, they will and should be in the playoff.
Don't see that happening, but yeah, you're
right.
right.
I mean,
you're right.
They're in control of their own destiny. I mean,
you're absolutely right.
You can't, to me, especially when you look at Wake and you look at how they've won some of their games.
Sure.
They've won impressively. You know, they're beating teams convincingly. They're not, I mean, they've got a couple close wins, but they've got a 20-point win at Virginia, which right now is looking like a really good win. Virginia's like 5-2 right now. Beat Florida State by 21, beat Louisville, beat Syracuse on the road, and Syracuse is, so if they beat Army on the road, North Carolina on the road, Clemson on the road, BC on the road, and then they have a home game against NC State, if they run the table against that and then beat whoever wins the Coastal,
you're right. They deserve to be in.
I completely agree. It ain't going to happen.
No, it's not.
Right? And Wake Forest, as an undefeated team, is still ranked behind Notre Dame. Right? So I think the ACC is going to be out. Then I look at the Big 12. There's only 2 undefeated teams left in the Big 12 and one one-loss Big 12 team. And none of them have played each other yet. Well, Baylor's played Oklahoma State and lost. But then Oklahoma and Oklahoma State play each other. And you look at Oklahoma, their schedule's not that difficult. They play Baylor in November 13th at Baylor. They host Iowa State, and then they host Texas Tech, who's surprisingly 5-2 right now. They're having a nice year. Like I'm thinking they got killed by Texas. I'm thinking they're not going to have a good record. And I looked at their record, they're 5-2. Oklahoma State still has to play. They still have to go to Iowa State and then to West Virginia, and they still have home games against TCU and Oklahoma, and then another road game against Texas Tech. There's no way they're going to be 2 1-loss teams in the Big 0 or a 1-loss team in the Big 12.
Right.
And then it's the Pac-12. It's Oregon or bust. I mean, so the Pac-12 is all but eliminated outside of Oregon. I mean, because everyone's got 2 or more losses. Because I cannot believe Arizona State was beating Utah 21-7 when I went to bed on Saturday night, and then woke up they lost 35-21. That everybody now has 2 losses except for Oregon,
right?
Which hurts Oregon because now they're going to have to rely on that win over Ohio State and beating a bunch of teams,
right?
And
I'm not convinced that Oregon's not going to slip up again. To be honest with you,
agree.
I mean, we'll see, but I really feel like the ACC, the Pac-12 are both eliminated at this point. I mean, at least they will be. The Pac-12 and the ACC. I think I'm not worried about either one of those conferences being in the play.
I'm still I can't go with you there on the Pac-12.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because, yes, could Oregon lose another game? Absolutely they could. And they play at UCLA this weekend. They got to play at Washington, who stinks, but you never know with a team like that. They just have that one good Saturday. They still have to play at Utah and home against Oregon State. And those are decent teams. If they get through UCLA this weekend, I'll feel a lot better about Oregon running the table. But the reality is they still have that road win over Ohio State.
They do.
They're going to have a win on their resume at 12-1 that Notre Dame can't come close to matching unless all of a sudden Purdue just runs the table.
Yeah. I'm not comparing Notre Dame to Oregon right now at all.
Well, that's kind of where I'm looking at it.
Okay.
It's like this is why Notre Dame fans need to
I see.
Hope
okay.
that they get it going, because
now I understand.
There are just not a lot of good teams in college football this year.
Nope.
And if we're complaining about Notre Dame, and we should be, because Notre Dame should be better, but if they get this thing going the way that it should, I do want Notre Dame in the playoff this year because this is going to be their best chance at getting a win based on what the other teams are.
Sure.
Now.
I get that now. But yeah, they're going to have to look. There's going to, one of the things that I can't stand in college football is the whole style points thing.
Yes.
But if Notre Dame's going to make any kind of noise, there's going to have to be style points.
They have to.
They can't win the next 6 games the way they won the first 5.
Yeah. I'll say this about style points. I think the committee does a much better job of evaluating that than the voters did in the past. Because these guys actually, I think there's a lady or two on the committee, at least one lady on the committee. You can tell they watch games because they're not fooled by records and margins of victory.
Right.
And that's why everybody.
Which is why Notre Dame has had success with them. Right. Because Notre Dame doesn't do the style points. And why a team
like BYU last year wasn't ranked as high as ESPN thought they should, even though they were undefeated and blowing people out because they hadn't played anybody.
Right.
So to me, they watch these games. So like a 35-point, okay, for example, they're not going to look at that and be like, wow, Notre Dame beat Wisconsin 41-13. They're going to look at that game and say Wisconsin was winning by 3 in the fourth quarter.
Correct.
They look at that. So to me, it's not so much about style points. It's about looking
But they got to look better than they have.
Now that will result in blowouts.
Yes. Absolutely.
So that, because they can't keep winning the way they are now and be a playoff team unless there's a bunch of 2-loss conference champions.
And let me clarify too. If they win the rest of their games, they're in a New Year's 6 and they're going to have a great matchup most likely. It's going to be, great. And Brian Kelly will make it sound like it's amazing. But 11-1 winning the way you did the first 5 is way different than 11-1 winning the way we're talking about winning and having a shot at the playoff. Because 11-1, the way you've been winning, you have 0 shot at the playoff, and we don't want them
unless
in the playoff.
There's just a bunch of 2-loss teams.
Yeah,
that's
right. That's
really
true.
The only thing that I could look at it and say is there's just a bunch of.
Well, with the way Notre Dame has played up to this point, depending on the matchup, right? Depending on the matchup, I just don't like Notre Dame's chances. I just feel like they're setting themselves up for another just massive letdown right now. We can have this conversation again, obviously, after Thanksgiving. Yeah. But right now, and depending on the matchup. Whew.
Yeah. The way I look at it, Vince, is right now, when I look at Cincinnati and Georgia, I don't see a loss on their schedule unless there's a big upset. With Georgia, I was thinking hey, look, they still got to play Florida, but right now, Florida's a hot mess. Florida LSU has looked abysmal in recent weeks, and their offense hasn't done much, and Florida just made them look bad. I made a post on the message board, Vince, and I want to get your thoughts on this as we kind of talk about that LSU-Florida game. First of all, how about Ed Orgeron, it being announced that he's leaving despite that win over Florida and despite having a title 2 years, less than 2 years?
I thought somebody was pulling my leg. Yeah. To be honest with you. I think it was a post on our Facebook group. Somebody said, well, now that Ed O's out, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what? He just got a big win. That should be considered a big win. And he's out. What are you talking about? Right. And of course they were right. I'm shocked by that. I think Coach O, he's not an idiot. He sees the writing on the wall. I'm sure that he negotiated a pretty nice golden parachute for himself.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's been disclosed yet or not, but he's not going to be hurting for any kind of money anytime soon. And he doesn't have to coach anymore.
Right.
He's good. He's been a head coach 3 different times.
Only once was he hired from
as an
outside.
Actual. Okay, so Ole Miss was that, right? And then he was interim at USC. He was interim at LSU, which became head coach.
Yeah, right.
He's sitting pretty.
He'll be fine. Yeah, he'll be fine.
Joe Salvatore, his buyout was $17 million. There you go.
And the other thing too is, if I'm him and I've got Ole Miss and Bama coming up the next 2 games, let me get my announcement after we just beat Florida.
Let me get my money here real quick because
they're gonna catch some L's. Well, and also too, if you're Coach O and that's going to happen, let's get it out now.
Yeah,
and
it lets them out in the open go look for a new coach.
Plan and for the players, hey, this isn't hanging over. You don't have to worry about playing for them anymore, fellas.
And recruiting,
you go play for
all
you.
That. Yeah,
you go play for your brothers. You don't worry about me. We're gonna be fine. I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay, fellas. Let's just play for your team. You're right.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go bank account.
So that so I that's the only chance they have at kind of getting right.
Right.
Is that that can become that galvanizing thing. But I'll tell you what, I made this is the post I made on Saturday. I want to get your thoughts on this, Vince.
Okay.
Dan Mullen has some surprising similarity, and I like Dan Mullen a lot as a coach.
I know you do.
Not for Notre Dame, just as a coach. I would not hire him at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
but as a coach, and I personally got to know him and like him. He helped me as a young coach develop and stuff. So I personally like Dan a bit. I just don't think he's a good fit in Notre Dame. But he's starting to have some of the issues that Brian Kelly had. Number one is the just stubbornness, but number two, unwillingness to realize that a coach has got to go before it's too late. I mean, Todd Grantham was a guy that he was a lot like John Tenuta. At the end of the year, his numbers are good.
Yeah.
But then you look at how he does against like the better teams in the schedule, and you're like, okay. And then they were terrible last year. I mean, the fact that Florida offense last year was a part of a team that lost 4 flipping games because they gave up 30 points a game. The fact that happened, I mean, and then now look at it. Look at them this year. I mean, they're not losing games this year 17-13, 31-29, 49-42, and the Kentucky game was 20-13. That's the anomaly. I mean, they're losing games because they're giving up a lot of points. Last year, they lost to A&M 41-38. They lost to LSU 37-34. They lost to Bama 52-46, and they lost to Oklahoma 55-20. I mean, if you don't recognize that some stuff's got to change, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's too late. Now it's 4-3, and your seat's starting to warm up a little bit. And I could not believe how they let LSU just run all over them. I mean, that's a team to me that showed no heart, in my opinion. That was the thing that shocked me.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the orange uniforms. I mean,
they're hideous.
Wow.
They hadn't given up more. They held Bama to 91 yards rushing. Tennessee had 148, but it was a 4 yards a carry. Kentucky went for 137. Kentucky runs the ball well.
Sure.
They held Vandy to 88. They gave up 321 to LSU.
Good Lord.
321. It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. I was shocked. I mean, he's going to have to make it. He's going to have to make a big time overhaul. And that's where I kind of look at it and say, I'm a little ticked at Brian Kelly, but I'd rather be where Notre Dame is right now than where Florida is. But that's what happens when you play this. Look, let's be honest. If Brian Kelly had the same schedule that Dan Mullen's had so far, games against Bama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and LSU, Notre Dame might be 4-3 right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that's
they're
fair.
lucky. They're lucky that they have played a pretty soft schedule so far. I mean, the win you're hanging your hat on right now is Purdue.
Well, they just beat the number 2 team in the country.
Yeah. It's nice having a coach that can go out and beat a number 2 team on the road twice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's pretty nice. But, what a game that was, Vince.
Man, I didn't – so, me and my amateur betting, I was like, well, Purdue is an 11-point, dog here. I'm taking Purdue in the points, man. I think they can keep it within 11. I looked like Nostradamus on that one. I had no idea that they were going to be able to just put a pounding on Iowa. You can tell I've listened to you an awful lot because I was counting on the Purdue offense to really do their thing against Iowa, and they did, man. I was, whoo, baby, that was a game.
That was
there.
impressive.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was really impressive. And and people are like, oh, look, they did 3 quarterbacks. They did 3 quarterbacks, and it worked because I wasn't expecting 3 quarterbacks.
And that's exactly right. When Notre Dame went to Tyler Buchner and nobody knew that he was coming in, it worked great.
Right.
You give people a week to prepare for him, it doesn't work great. It's not that – guys, come on. Right. It is not a complicated scenario.
But,
here.
man, he called a heck of a game. And look, this is the thing is, Vince, is when you look at that game, this is the issue that we've kind of had with Iowa all season. You can't just keep winning games like that because you're forcing a mess of turnovers and your offense isn't good.
Right.
And this is the thing we've said all year. Like we've talked about this. Like, and my man Ladarius Martin's talking about it. I told you I was good. I'm like, they're good, but they're not that good.
Yeah.
And they're winning games. I mean, they've had wins where they won by 28 with 303 yards of offense and 4.7 yards per play. They beat Iowa State on the road by 10, and they went for 173 yards of offense, 2.9 yards per play.
Right.
They went for 305 against Penn State, 4.0 yards per play. They have only been over 5.5 yards per play once all year. That was against Kent State. They went for 5.57. They had 278 yards of offense in a 10-point win over Colorado State. Why? Because they are turning teams over at an ungodly rate. 3 against Indiana, 4 against Iowa State, 7 against Maryland, 4 against Penn State. They had 1 forced turnover against Purdue.
And lost.
And turned it over 4 times.
Yeah, exactly.
To a team that here's the crazy stat, and they mentioned it on the TV broadcast. Coming into the game, Iowa was by far the best team in the country at forcing turnovers, and Purdue was the worst team in the country at forcing turnovers. But in this game, it flipped, and that's another reason I love college football.
Yep.
Is because that the thing that you thought would have led to Purdue losing 24-7 is exactly why they won this game. But that's the thing is Iowa's a lot like Wisconsin. If you cannot turn the ball over and just don't give them points, they can't score.
Exactly, and that's why they're going to lose again. I mean, right. I'm sorry, and that's why I never had a whole lot of faith in Iowa being a top 4 team. I never thought that was going to be the case. I did not think that they were going to lose to Purdue. Okay, I didn't, but I thought Purdue's offense could give them a hard time, and it ended up working out that way, but not to the degree that it was. I don't think anybody.
And now, man, if you're Purdue, that home loss to Minnesota that you gave away in the second half is luminous. So they'd be 5-1 right now with a road loss over Notre Dame on their schedule right now. They'd be in control of the West right now. But of course, they didn't do that. And now there's Iowa still, I think, is in a good place. But Purdue's only got 1 conference loss right now.
True.
So the West is going to be a little bit more competitive than I thought it was going to be at this point in time, because now all of a sudden Minnesota, who I think is a hot mess, was a hot mess for a while. Now they're looking a little different because now they've got 2 losses, but one of their losses was to Bowling Green. But they beat Nebraska this weekend, a team that just invents ways to lose, Vince.
Well, they're a lot like Detroit, Detroit Lions. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Yikes.
You have an undisciplined coach who has an undisciplined team.
Yeah.
I mean, simple as that. But, man, I mean, they did – Jeff Brom put on a coach's clinic this weekend. And everybody knows I love Jeff Brom as a play caller. I think the shine is off of him a little bit in regards to being a head coach.
Sure.
Because I don't think he's done a good job putting a staff together. He's done a good job of recognizing things need to change. But I'll say this defense that Purdue has this year has turned out to be pretty freaking good. They've held 4 of their 6 opponents, Vince, under 300 yards of offense. And the highest they've had this year is 362 against Oregon State and 343 by Notre Dame. So he made hires and it's turned around. Now, can it continue the rest of the year? We'll find out.
Yeah.
They still got a little better. But, man, the clinic he put on this weekend from a play calling standpoint against Iowa, a team that came in with a great pass defense. I mean, a great pass defense. And his quarterbacks went 31 of 43 for 378 yards and 2 touchdowns. And his ability, and imagine this, right? You all have never heard this before. This is going to be the first time any of you have ever heard this. I'm saying incredibly sarcastically. The ability to keep moving David Bell around so Iowa never knew where he was going to be.
He was the X factor in that game.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Just brilliant. And it also makes the job that Marcus Freeman and that staff did to shut him down more impressive, because David Bell's played in 5 games this year. 8 catches for 134 against Oregon State, 6 for 121 against Connecticut, 6 for 120 against Minnesota, 11 for 240 against Iowa, 7 for 64 against Notre Dame before he went out. And half of those yards came on 1 play. Like that puts a little perspective on Notre Dame being able to shut down David Bell, because other teams have tried that,
right? But
to no success. But his ability to move him around and just get him the ball in different positions is like, this is why I said, remember before they played Purdue, I said Tommy Rees needs to be studying Jeff Brom, not Sean McDermott, and not Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. Because they're pro coaches, you're a college coach.
Right.
If he wants to learn how to call plays at an elite level, he needs to study Jeff Brom, because they're very similar in a lot of ways. Pro style, spread the ball, get it out, those type of things. Man, it was fun to watch. It was really fun to watch.
Yes, it was. There's
really
no question about that.
Are you surprised? I mean, Purdue's been so bad on defense in recent seasons, Vince. I'm kind of shocked at how good their defense has been this year. I'm not going to lie to you.
It always feels like they've got a player or two that, are headed to the NFL, but then it's players like 3 through 11 or 3 through 15, however you want to look at it, that kind of hold that unit back.
Yeah.
And they're playing so much more as a team this year than they have in a really long time.
Last 3 seasons, Vince, 30 points a game in 18, 30.6 in 19, 29.8 last year. This year, they're giving up 14 points a game.
Yeah, right. I mean, they cut it in half, and that's not an easy task.
The first 6 games, they've played Notre Dame, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Connecticut, and Oregon State. Not a murderer's row of offenses, but decent teams. And they're giving up less than 300 yards per game of total defense. I mean, that's pretty good from Purdue. I mean, Purdue ranks 5th in the nation in scoring defense right now, Vince.
That's crazy.
That's kind of nuts to me, don't you think? I mean,
yeah. For a Purdue team, absolutely. Because I mean, they're perennially a mid
defense.
They're perennially a mid-tier, Big Ten team.
Yeah, and bad on defense.
Yeah, and bad on defense. Exactly.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of fun watching them. Did you watch any of the Kentucky-Georgia game by chance?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Georgia defense is filthy.
They're so good they make Stetson Bennett look like a good quarterback.
Yes.
Is really what it comes down to.
That's a great way to put it.
I had going into that game and making predictions and all these things. Like my whole thing was I don't know if Georgia's offense is going to be able to do anything with 13 at quarterback, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Their defense is so good. They could put anybody they wanted at quarterback, and it's not going to make a difference. Yeah. They're still going to put up points because they're going to have short fields, and the defense is just going to dominate. It doesn't matter. Now, I will say that, well, I don't even know if I'm going to say it because normally I would say that you need an offense in the Final Four, right? In the playoff. I would say that you need an offense, but with the competition that they may face in the playoff, they may not. Yeah. They may not need a dynamic offense. That this defense is so good that might not matter.
Well, and it's one of those weird years where there just aren't a lot of teams that can score.
Right, exactly.
I am, however, one team I'm going to keep an eye on is Oklahoma. The reason I say that is what happens as teams start getting more film on Caleb Williams.
Yeah, that's fair because he's a true freshman who's just out there making plays right now.
He is a much better talent than Spencer Rattler, but obviously doesn't have the experience.
Well, and he's not the mental head case of Spencer Rattler either.
Don't disagree with that. I mean, he was pretty brilliant on Saturday.
Yes, he was
really good against TCU.
Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting to see how they develop because that was the team that was always kind of my dark horse national championship contender because they can score. Their defense is a hot mess again, right? It's like, oh, their defense has improved. Then they start playing Big 12 games and you're like, no, they haven't improved. They are all of a sudden you get in Big 12 games and they can score now and their defense is a sieve. But man, they impressed me. But I'll tell you another Big 12 team that's impressed me. I did not think Oklahoma State was going to go into Austin and win that game. And here's the fun thing about Oklahoma State: their offense is kind of not good. They're winning with defense.
Which saying that in the Big 12 is like defense. Ridiculous. I mean,
it really is impressive, Vince.
Yeah,
what they're doing on defense.
I watched the beginning of that game, and Texas had it under control again.
Yeah,
like But apparently, I need to stop watching the first half of Texas games because last week I'm watching, they're dominating Oklahoma. This game's over. And then I'm watching the first half this time. They're pretty much dominating Oklahoma. Okay, this game's over. And then I look back and I'm like, guess not. I mean, Texas just has to be licking their wounds right now, too. Yeah. I mean, they have shown that they're a pretty darn good football team for a half. And then the second half, they just implode. Yeah, I don't get it. And I don't know if this, maybe it's growing pains with a new coach and all these different things.
Well, but man, I think it's what it shows is here's what it shows to me, Vince. It shows that you can bring in a great play caller and a guy who's a good football coach. And I think Steve Sarkisian is those things. But Texas wasn't losing because Tom Herman couldn't call plays.
Right.
Texas was losing because Tom Herman had developed a toxic culture. And that it takes more than 7 games to change that.
That's fair. And that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair.
And you've got to teach a team how to win. And right now, that's Sarkisi's thing is he's got to teach them how to win.
They're not there yet at all.
They're not there yet.
Yeah.
But they're showing promise. I mean, if I'm a Texas fan, I'm frustrated, but I'm also encouraged because they do battle. But, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, Oklahoma State held Texas to 317 yards of total offense. I mean, that's a Texas offense that had been actually, I mean, 620 against Rice, 639 against TCU, 516 against Oklahoma. Their down game was 414 and 5.5 against TCU on the road. I mean, and they went for 317 yards, almost 100 yards below what their season worst was at home against Oklahoma State. I mean, it just goes to show if you commit to playing great defense, you can be. I mean, it's not like this is a defense loaded with 5-star and 4 top 100 players. It's an impressive thing what they're doing on defense, Vince, and it's week after week. They've held Texas scored 24. Baylor scored 14, K-State 20, Boise 20, Tulsa 23, Southwest Missouri State 16. I mean, they've been between 14 and 24 all year.
Well, and they're doing it when it matters, right? They held Texas to no points in the fourth quarter, and yet their offense scored 16.
They were down 17-3 at one point in time, and they went on to outscore Texas 29-7 in the last 2.5 quarters of that game.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, boy.
19 points in the second half, and Texas scored 7. I mean, that's where it is right there.
Yeah.
It's second half performance by
Texas.
Texas.
That's a winning culture.
Yeah.
Right? That's a team. Doubt. They play great team football. They're poised. They don't respond to being down. Sark will get them there, I believe.
Okay.
He just has to change the culture, and they've got to get some better athletes on defense as well. We've got a super chat from Patrick Barnes.
Oh,
says, when was the last time? Thank you for that, Patrick, by the way, very, very much. When was the last time there was so much chaos in the top 25 other than Georgia? Nobody's looking like a lock for the championship. I mean, I think 2017 is probably the closest we've seen to that. And it was a year where we saw 2 SEC teams in the championship game. And it was the last year that a team won a championship without having a very good offense.
Yeah.
If you remember that year, Clemson wasn't very good that year, but the ACC stunk. If you remember that, Clemson, they lose 24-6 to Alabama in the title game. That was the Kelly Bryant year. They lost a road game to a 4-8 Syracuse team. They weren't that good, but the ACC wasn't that good that year, which it's not this year either. And so you look at it and you say, man, this is kind of a similar to 2017 year. That was the last time Georgia made a run. And now I'll say this, that year though, that 2017 Oklahoma team was really, really good. And that Georgia team had a much better offense than this one. We had Sonny Michel and Nick Chubb at running back. You had Jake Fromm at quarterback.
Yeah.
If they can get a team that can score 27 to 30 points on them, I think they're going to lose. And that's why I say this Georgia team is by far the best team in the country. This Georgia team doesn't beat last year's Bama team. It's not close. They don't beat last year. I mean, it'd be like a 14-point game, right? It'd be similar to what we saw against Notre Dame, in my opinion. Georgia would be a little better on offense. They definitely do not beat 2019 LSU or 2018 Clemson, or their 2017 version of themselves. But that they don't play against those teams. This is 2021. They only have to play against teams from 2021, and that's where they are. And that's also why I say don't be thinking about next year, because next year all these teams like Clemson that are going licking their wounds, they're going to bringing everybody back next year.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And
Alabama is going to be a sophomore next year.
Yeah, Alabama, Oklahoma. I mean, all of those teams that are, going through. If you want to call Notre Dame rebuilding, that these other teams are doing the same dang thing. Mm-hmm. So this is the year to take advantage of it. And if Notre Dame can't take advantage of it, then
right.
Their loss.
Georgia has as many starters returning this year as Notre Dame does. By the way, they lost the same number of starters as Notre Dame lost.
I mean, they're on their backup quarterback.
Yes.
And I mean,
Yes. And their best receivers hurt.
Yeah.
Their starting tight end hasn't played a whole year.
Yeah.
The whole season. Their number 2 tight end, who transferred from LSU, who everybody thought was going to be a stud, that some people thought was better than Michael Mayer as a freshman, which I scoff at, hasn't played all season. They beat Clemson without 3 of their top 4 pass catchers. And yet we have to listen to people talk about how, well, Notre Dame's struggling because they're inexperienced. Come on.
Agreed. You want to talk about our boy Lane Kiffin at all?
Oh yeah, that was a fun game to watch.
Did you watch the whole game?
I watched most of it. Yes.
Okay, I watched the entire game because it was the 5th game of a 5-game parlay, and
so I know why you were watching it.
and that game was something else, man. I mean, that game. I mean, you can talk about the antics at the end, obviously, with the fans and all that,
disgusting.
Which was ridiculous. And I was watching it with my 12-year-old daughter. She's like, "Dad, what do they do?" And I had to explain.
This ain't the WCW.
Like,
you don't, you know,
right?
Know?
And the fact that I had to explain it to my daughter, who was actually interested in sitting and watching football with me, was not the conversation that I wanted to have.
But are people throwing mustard at the other team?
Why did he just get hit with a golf ball? You know, like just ridiculous stuff.
Who brings a range ball to a game unless you plan on throwing it at somebody?
Thank you. Exactly. But I will say, of all people, because I am not a Lane Kiffin fan, okay? I think he's done some really dumb stuff in his adult career.
He's not a great guy, but he's a heck of a play caller.
There you go. Thank you for clarifying. I thought he actually handled it very well, which he didn't have to.
Well, when you got more points than the other team on the scoreboard, it helps.
Agreed. That makes it a lot easier. But I thought he actually handled it very calmly and rationally, which he didn't have to. And I would not have predicted him to do so. So it was an interesting game. But I give him and Ole Miss credit. I mean, they did enough to win that game, but man, what a boneheaded move on that last play to run out of bounds. Like
that was, I mean, that's just no football awareness
whatsoever. Zero. You've at least got to get, I mean, even if you throw a pick, it doesn't even matter. There's literally no time.
Yeah, there's no time. And if you're going to run, you cut back to the middle and maybe I mean, that's just a kid that had we talk about how Jack Cohn comes off the bench against Virginia Tech and he's locked in and he's ready to go and it's bam, 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 bam,
This
bam.
Is the opposite of that.
This is what it would look like if Jack Cohn was over there like grabbing hot dogs on the sideline and, making, looking at his dad and being like, I can't believe I got benched. You know what I mean? Like, nope. This is what it looks like when a quarterback's not locked in compared to what happens when a mature quarterback who says, hey, look, I'm not. I mean, do you think Jack Cohn is happy that he came off the field? No.
Of course not.
No.
Of course not.
He's a great teammate. And, I felt bad for Hendon Hooker because, man, that kid played his absolute butt off in that game. I mean, they're not in that game if it's not for Hendon Hooker.
No chance.
And it just goes to show that what a player does is not always about his talent. It can also be about the coaching. For some reason, despite the fact he always put up good numbers, Virginia Tech just would not commit to Hendon Hooker. Just wouldn't do it. And he goes to Tennessee, and they don't start him for whatever reason because you see Joe Milton, a big, strapping, big arm. But he's not a good quarterback.
Right.
And then Hendon Hooker comes in with his funky throwing motion and really awkward playing style, and all the kid does is make plays. And Tennessee's sitting there at 4-3, but I'm like, man, that is a good 4-3 football team. And you watch them. That game was two really good play callers going at each other.
Yeah, it really was.
They both ran as much as they threw.
Yeah,
I mean, it was fun to watch. Vince.
That was a fun game to watch, and I do at times find it difficult to look. I'm a fan of football. Don't get me wrong, but when I'm watching it, I have trouble getting interested when it's teams I don't really care about, right? But I was interested in this game. This game was fun for me to watch, and it was a good game until it was a half-hour delay at the end. It totally just zapped the fun out of that. But I still can't believe he ran out of bounds. I'm sorry. That was just ridiculous.
It was like a horrible end to what was a really fun game.
Yes, because I was like, oh my gosh, you can't. No, they're driving down. You left too much time.
And all you idiot Tennessee fans, you just hurt your team because they had all the momentum. They had Ole Miss on their heels.
Yes,
and you morons hurt your team because you lost a lot of that momentum.
Just terrible.
But man, it was a great game. And Lane Kiffin not Lane Kiffin, but Josh, was it you that sent me that quote? No, it was a buddy of mine, Jeff, sent me a quote that was a recent interview from Josh Heupel, the coach for Tennessee.
Yep.
Now, to give some context, Tennessee's been a not a great offense recently. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think
Their
so.
offense hasn't been good in recent seasons. Last year, Tennessee averaged 21.5 points per game, okay, and 346 yards of total offense per game at 5.3 yards per play. This year, through 7 games, they've played Pitt, Florida. Pitt's like 6-1 now. Florida, Missouri, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Bowling Green, Tennessee Tech. They're averaging 39.3 points per game. The year before that, they were 24.2. The year before that, they were 22.8, right? So we now have a 2017, they were 19.8. So last 4 years, 19.8, 22.8, 24.2, 21.5 points per game.
Yikes.
7 games through the season, they're 39.3. They're averaging 473 yards per game and 6.3 yards per play with mostly the same players. Now Hendon Hooker transferred in, right? But mostly the same players. And they're starting their guy that started the season at number 2 quarterbacks playing for them right now. And he had a comment, and I'm going to try to find this comment, but it just goes to show like why, just why I say what I say about Notre Dame and why it's so frustrating. Here was the quote that the guy sent me. They're talking about why he goes tempo, right? And now look what UCF is doing this year without Josh Heupel calling plays. They're trying to run Gus Malzahn's offense, and they're not good. He says, when you go fast, you don't have to be perfect. I'll take faster over perfection. Because that's what we've said. You don't have to be in the right call all the time when you go tempo, because you're going to get them they're going to have to line up quick. They're going to make mistakes. And it just amazes me that like almost all the good offenses that we see now have some sort of get lined up, spread the field, go with some sort of pace, except for Notre Dame, who refuses to do it.
Right. And it would cover up some of their offensive warts if they could just go faster.
Yes. Does anyone really want to tell me that Tennessee has better talent than Notre Dame does?
No.
It's about saying, hey, this is who we're going to be, and we're going to do it, and we're going to embrace this. And I'm hoping that that's what Notre Dame does.
Hoping.
Yeah.
Me too. I'll always hold out hope. I will always hold out hope, man. I'm telling you. And crazier things have happened at night at Notre Dame Stadium against USC. So hopefully that happens. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yep. So a couple other things. I'm glad to hear we don't have to hear about BYU anymore. Thank you, Dave Aranda.
Yes.
Did you hear Dave Aranda's comment after the game?
No.
He is like that dude. There's no way he goes LSU. That dude is way too intellectual for LSU. He had this. You got to listen to it, Vince. It's hard for me. It was a great comment. Somebody asked him about his team to have any penalties, and because he's a real calm, like stoic guy. Real intelligent. You could sit down and he's like the kind. He kind of.
Well, he's the kind of guy you bring in to clean up a program after a scandal. I mean,
but he reminds me a lot of Clark Lee.
Okay.
And that, he's the kind of guy you could sit down and talk an hour with about like politics or
whatever,
culture or philosophy. You know what I mean? Like you could have like real intellectual conversations with this guy. But he had this comment about how they had no penalties in this win. And they asked him about it, and he started talking about like just the mastery of self. And it was not in a way like a postmodern, like it's all about me, but more about how, football is such a, a lot of times football is this violent game and guys are looking to get out their emotions and energy. His thing is like, I want you to have control and have a mastery of self, and it leads to discipline and doing your job. And it was a great answer.
Yes, he's right.
It was a great answer.
He's absolutely right.
And that's why his team is 6-1 right now.
Right.
And that's not a shot on Notre Dame. This is just an observation. I don't want anyone to think that that's somehow like, oh, Brian Kelly should listen.
Dave Miranda for head coach.
We're just talking ball here, right? And things that we like and things we don't see, things that we see. Couple other observations for me. Huge missed opportunity for BC this weekend. You're 4-1. You're coming off of a close loss against Clemson. You had a bye week, and you get curb stomped at home by NC State 33-7. Yeah. Big missed opportunity.
That game was over before it started. It felt like.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like that was
I mean, it was kind of close for a while, but then the third quarter, NC State just came out and just curb stomped them in the second half. I mean, and I still don't understand how Arizona State has got a pretty good defense against a Utah team that doesn't have a great offense, got outscored 28-0 in the second half of that game. That was the most bizarre. Like, I literally stopped paying attention. When I saw it was 21-7, I was like,
Game over.
Done.
Yeah.
This is a team that has 2 losses to Mountain West, basically Mountain West caliber teams. They lost to BYU and San Diego State, Utah. And now they're just running the Pac-12 right now. They're undefeated in the Pac-12. Can you believe that? They're 4-2, but they're undefeated in the Pac-12.
Yep.
The craziest thing. And I'll tell you what, man, huge, speaking of Mountain West, huge win for Brian Harsin and Auburn this weekend. Did you see any of that game?
I did not.
Against Arkansas? Man.
Bits and pieces, but not enough to,
I'll tell you, we talk about a winning culture. So, I mean, Arkansas goes up 17-14 early in the third quarter, and like Auburn kind of, I think they punted, and then they had a fumble return for a touchdown, and that just opened up the floodgates. It was like I'll tell you what, that's a gritty team. Talking about a team that's got an impressive record for their an impressive win-loss record for their schedule. That's one. I mean, they lost at Penn State in a game they battled their butts off.
Yeah.
They battled against Georgia. They just don't have enough horses on offense in the pass game. They battled against Georgia, but then to rally back from that loss to Georgia by 24 and then go on the road and beat a home loss to Georgia, and then go on the road and beat Arkansas. And that was and they've also got a win at LSU. And I'll tell you what, that's a team that just looks like they are just so much better coached right now than they were in the past. You know what I mean? So you're going to have to check them out here soon, Vince.
It's funny because I heard the Auburn head coach talk at some point.
Brian Harsin.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a speech or what. I can't remember exactly, but I remember my takeaway from it was, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that doesn't necessarily mean anything, hearing a guy speak, right? But there's certain things that you can gain from hearing a guy speak. You know what I mean? And I was impressed. I was impressed by him. And Auburn's a place where you can kind of fly under the radar a little bit because obviously you're in the same state as Alabama, realizing who Auburn is. But I'm just saying, in comparison, you can fly under the radar a little bit, get some things figured out, but then you've got every resource in the world to be good there if you can do it right. And I guess I'm not overly surprised that Auburn is kind of figuring some things out. I'm interested to see where it kind of goes from here. You know what I mean?
Yep. Couple quick observations before we go, Vince, about the Notre Dame upcoming schedule. It was kind of an up and down overall weekend for Notre Dame's schedule overall. Wisconsin had a nice win over Army. Toledo had a bad loss. Purdue had a huge win.
Yeah.
North Carolina had a nice win over Miami. They almost lost it. Their defense is garbage. I still can't believe there were people advocating for Jay Bateman to replace Clark Lee.
Yeah.
That
was a big name
replace
too.
Mike Elko. Because you remember. Okay.
I remember.
Yep. I couldn't believe that. Nice road win for UCLA, but real quick, I just saw that Stanford caught another L. They now have a losing record.
I can't figure out Stanford.
They're not good. They beat a USC team that basically has quit on the season. Stanford's not good.
True.
They're just not good. Virginia is looking pretty good. Now, look, Duke is horrible. But Brendan Armstrong, the quarterback for Virginia, a Bronco Mendenhall quarterback, is on pace for over 5,000 passing yards this year. Isn't that nut? I mean, that's just insane to me. They beat Duke 48-0. It could have been worse. They only scored 14 points in the second half.
Yikes.
He went 25 of 45 for 364 yards. So Brendan Armstrong, with the talent he has around him at Virginia, can go for 554, 407, 268, 487, and 364 in his last 4 games. Oh, in the first 2 games, 339 and 405. He can do that with 19 touchdowns. But Notre Dame can't pass on Toledo and Cincinnati and it just it's frustrating. That was a big win for them. Like they're 5-2 now, and they've got a schedule coming up, Vince, that and we kind of talked about this last week. Their schedule coming up, they could be a ranked team.
Are they the scariest team left for you? Virginia?
Yes, they are. Because it's on. I mean, they can score. North Carolina
they're the most balanced.
USC can. Yes, their defense isn't good, but it's not as awful as North Carolina's.
Right.
But so for me, I look at them. They've got a quarterback that can run though. That's the thing. Is like Sam Howell can scramble, but he's not a runner.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brendan Armstrong can run.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't run a ton.
I'm not worried about Sam Howell hurting the defense. You know, we talk about mobile quarterbacks against, Notre Dame defenses, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Sam Howell isn't one of those guys.
I think the one thing that gives me pause, too, is as far as maybe going North Carolina, is I do think North Carolina is the more balanced team. Virginia just they don't run. They're not.
You're talking about balanced offensively.
Offensively, yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I'm just thinking about
defense is terrible.
Right. Because Notre Dame hasn't balanced offensively. Yeah. Thank you for that correction. Because that's did you get hit in the head? Because 2 minutes ago, you just said the exact opposite thing.
Right.
I'm talking about offenses because I'm not worried about all the teams they play moving forward don't have good defense.
Correct.
Basically. Georgia Tech's the best defense they've faced, and they're ranked 72nd in the country in scoring defense. But to me, when I look at Virginia, that mobile quarterback concerns me because that's what we've seen. But he can throw it too, and he doesn't lock in on one guy. I mean, he spreads the ball around. They've got 5 receivers with at least 23 catches so far this year. I mean, 3 receivers, 1 tight end, and this K'Tuan Thompson who plays quarterback, running back, receiver. He does a little bit of tight end, everything. I mean, they've got some weapons, and they spread it around, and that to me kind of concerns me when you look at what gives Notre Dame's defense problems. So yeah,
sure,
and it's on the road. But the flip side of that, and the point that I was making before I got off track a little bit is they're 6-5-2 now. They've got Georgia Tech at home this weekend. Then they play at BYU. Now, that BYU win's not going to be as good now because BYU's unranked, but they win those 2 games. They're 7-2. They will be in the top 25 by then, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because they were receiving votes in both of the polls this week. Now, it wasn't a lot of votes in the
they're in the discussion, though.
But they got a lot more votes in the coaches poll.
Sure.
But if you go out and win your next 2 games and you're 7-2, all of a sudden you kind of look at that and say, they could crack top 25. Notre Dame needs them to win their next 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need them to.
Yes.
Because they need to have sort of a November road victory over a ranked team. Because it'll be at night.
Because that's the only one that even has a prayer of being a ranked team, I think, right?
When
in
Notre
November?
Dame plays them, yeah. I mean, because North Carolina's – because this is what we talked about.
Because North Carolina's still October.
Ranked, the only way North Carolina ends up ranked is if they beat Notre Dame. They won't be ranked beforehand, and if Notre Dame beats them, they won't be ranked.
Right.
Georgia Tech's 3-3. Because what is the record? USC's 3-3. North Carolina is now 4-3. Navy's 1-5. Virginia's 5-2. Georgia Tech is 3-3, and Stanford is 3-4. There's no chance that if Notre Dame wins out, anyone other than Virginia has a chance to be ranked. And you could say maybe Virginia Tech could crack the top 25. That's out.
Yeah.
After they got smoked at home by Pitt. And I'll tell you what, Pitt, you've got to be kicking yourself right now if you're Pitt, because they're 6-1 right now, right, Vince?
Yeah.
They have a road win over Tennessee. Do you know who they lost to? Western Michigan.
Oh, the Bronx.
They beat Tennessee on the road, came home the next week and lost at home to Western Michigan. The last 2 weeks, they beat Georgia Tech on the road, 52-21, 3 weeks because they had a bye last week. 52-21 over Georgia Tech, 77-7 over New Hampshire, 28-7 road victory over Virginia Tech. And they also have a road victory over Tennessee. And you're like, if you don't lose to freaking Western Michigan, you're a top 15 team right now. I mean, Western Michigan, come on, who just 2 weeks ago caught a 45-20 L to Ball State.
Yeah, I was looking up their schedule. They lost to Michigan, and they lost to Ball State. And Ball State, they're on a bit of a win streak right now.
What a barf right now, man. Pitt is averaging 48.3 points per game. Right. Okay. Now look, here's the deal. They did play New Hampshire and scored 77. Okay. So let's take that game out. They've got 5 games then, right? Take that game out. They're still at 42.6. I mean, come on, man. Come on. Okay. Let's take the UMass game out where they scored 51 because UMass stinks. Okay.
Fair.
All right. Yeah. They're still averaging 40.5 points per game. But Notre Dame can barely get over 30 because they're inexperienced.
Right. Inexperienced. Yeah.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Yep. Frustrating. So anyway, Vince, so that's kind of it on the weekend. We got a couple here info on Zach Rice. He commits on Thursday. Don't think it's going to be Notre Dame.
Right.
So that's going to be it. Alex McSee, anyone think Heastan's may come back? I've been saying this for a while. Harry Heastan's not going to coach anymore. I'd be shocked if he coaches anymore. And if he does, there's only one coordinator that I think he would coach with, and that guy ain't at Notre Dame. That's not a shot on Tommy Rees. It's just I don't think Harry wants to coach anymore. I don't think Coach Heastan would have any issue coaching with Tommy Rees if he still wanted to coach again. But Brian Kelly's not bringing Harry Heastan back.
Right.
Just not going to do it. And Harry Heastan's not going to come back and coach for Brian Kelly. So we can kind of get rid of that. There's a lot of other good coaches out there that can coach the offensive line. It's not Harry Heastan or they're going to suck on the offensive line.
Right. Absolutely correct.
So, I just wanted to kind of get that out there.
We do have a super chat that I think we missed. From John.
John A1, our dude. My bad, John.
Did we have this one? I didn't think we did.
We did not.
Okay, good. So, John, thank you for the super chat, my friend. He says, can the Notre Dame defense improve enough to win the next 6 games in spite of the offense? And how could they do that? I think the short answer is yes, they could. The offenses are better the second half than they were the first half. There's no question. But the things that the defense have struggled with are fixable. In my opinion. And on top of that, even it says in spite of the offense, and I totally understand where you're coming from, John, but the defenses are so poor in the second half that I feel like even if the offense doesn't improve, they're still going to score. I'm not saying they're going to score 40, but I'm saying that they're going to score enough to win.
Yeah, yes, they can win all the next 6 games without in spite of the offense. Because number one, to your point, Vince, is true. But Notre Dame's facing some really bad offenses down the stretch. I mean, we just talked about, Notre Dame is not doing what they need to do on offense, right? So what I'm about to say is not an excuse for what we've seen the first 6 games from Notre Dame. Having said that, we just talked about how the fact that Purdue right now is one of the best defenses in the country statistically, right? Notre Dame scored more points on them than anyone else has scored.
Right.
I believe, now again, that was also, they didn't have their starting cornerback, their best cornerback. But I believe, I could be wrong on this. I'm actually looking it up right now. I think Notre Dame also had the second most yards against them. And yes, they did. So Notre Dame scored more points on them than anybody else at 27. And Wisconsin, I also believe, ranks very high nationally in total defense, in scoring defense. Scoring defense, Wisconsin right now is ranked. That includes giving up 21 points on special teams. Wisconsin right now ranks 23rd in scoring defense at 19.3 points per game. You take away the 21 points that their defense did not give up to Notre Dame.
Right.
And it's a little bit of a different story. So I'm actually looking it up now. You take away those special teams, and I'm trying to – so minus 21 divided by 6. They're down to 15.8 points per game. That puts them at 10th nationally in scoring defense. Cincinnati's 3rd nationally in scoring defense. So they have played some Toledo is 16th in scoring defense. So they've played the number 3, the number 16, the number 5, the number 23 scoring defenses in the country so far this year.
I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is 36th. Okay. The rest of the schedule is filled with the best scoring defense they face will be now Virginia at 64th. So even if Notre Dame doesn't do anything better or anything different on offense, they're going to score more points in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
You'll see games like we saw against Florida State, who has a crappy defense, where Notre Dame could just kind of out-talent them. So Notre Dame's going to score more points in the second half of the season than they have in the first half. Doesn't mean they're going to be better. It just, the quality of the competition is way worse for them. The second half of the schedule has bad defenses.
Right. Yes. Correct.
So the Notre Dame defense doesn't have to hold teams to 15 points a game.
Right.
You hold them to 20 or under, Notre Dame's going to win every game convincingly. That's key. Now, what you can't do is do what they did against Florida State. That's the concern I have. You can't, so if they play every team left on the schedule the way they did Cincinnati, Notre Dame goes 6-0 and wins every game by at least a touchdown because of how bad the defenses are that they face.
Right. Yep.
Notre Dame will accidentally get 30-plus points against most of these teams. That's how bad their defenses are. And if they don't,
Yeah, we're having a different conversation. That is for sure.
Yes. So just real quick, USC is giving up 27.3 points per game. North Carolina is giving 28.9 points per game. Navy's giving up 32.7 points per game. These are the teams that Notre Dame play moving forward. Virginia is is the best left on the schedule at 64th, giving up 24.4 points per game. Next is Georgia Tech, who ranks 71st at 25.7 points per game. And then finally Stanford, who ranks 81st at 28 points per game. So yes, Notre Dame will score. And the frustration for me is going to be that they're going to point to that and say, see,
the offense
is why we should have kept doing what we were doing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now, if they do that and they're scoring 40-plus points a game,
that's a different conversation.
That's like, okay, yeah, you guys have done some things and it's working out better.
Right. Yeah.
So it reminds me a lot of the 2019 final stretch. Remember that when they just stuck on offense?
Oh, yeah.
And then after the Virginia Tech game, they started scoring a bunch of points against teams that were terrible on defense.
Right.
Like, see, everything's good. So anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. I actually have to get rolling, Vince, because I'm about to go get in the car and I'm about to start driving back to Indiana.
Come on, baby. Come on home.
A little bit of a long trip home today.
Come on home.
But it's been a fun show, and I appreciate everybody being with us today. Appreciate the super chats. Appreciate the comments going on. Would have liked to kind of dive into maybe, Vince, we can do this one of these days. What are there any other days this week that you're going to be home by chance?
We'll talk.
Okay, because I do want to get into, maybe we can do this on the mailbag on Friday. I do want to get into the LSU head coaching search.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You did write that down today.
The names we're hearing, and then some of the names that I would look at if I was LSU.
Yeah, we might have to fit that in someplace this week for sure. Because
I can take 5 extra minutes right now. You know what I mean? I know you got to run. I think,
no, right? we could do, if we do it, we could do it. But yeah, I've got about 5. We could just do this because I'm curious to see what you're thinking. And I'm seeing a lot of people talk about, Marcus Freeman because he flirted with LSU when he came.
They're not going to hire if they're not going to hire a defensive coordinator.
Okay, I just put that out there then because that's what people on this chat.
Well, I think that's really more people's fear.
Okay,
than it is a realistic option for me.
Yeah.
Now here's the big thing. I don't think LSU is the job they think it is. I had somebody tell me the other day, look, LSU doesn't make this move if they don't already have someone lined up. And I said, you are right in theory.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking intelligently and you're thinking with common sense.
Right.
But this is the same program that fired Les Miles during the season a few years ago and ended up with Ed Orgeron after they clearly wanted someone else. They settled on Ed Orgeron because they didn't have it lined up.
Right.
Because they thought they were going to get Tom Herman, but they didn't have Tom Herman lined up. And there was some interesting backstory when Tom Herman decided he wasn't going to come on some people that wanted that job that didn't get that job. But yeah, I don't see them going after Marcus Freeman. I think they're, Mel Tucker's the guy that's been named as he's the popular media candidate right now. He's doing a great job at Michigan State. He's coaching the SEC. He was at Georgia a couple years ago. He was at Colorado. I'd be real nervous about that hire. And we've talked about this. I mean, Mel Tucker's doing a really nice job this year at Michigan State. Can we see how he finishes the season first before we start anointing him as someone who's going to take over Michigan State?
Yeah, because the schedule has not – I mean, it's been kind.
They've beat Northwestern, Youngstown State, Miami. That looked like a great win at the time. It's still a good win. You beat Miami by 21 on the road. It's a good win. I don't care how bad Miami is.
Yeah.
You beat Nebraska in a game you should have lost. You beat Western Kentucky. You beat Rutgers and Indiana. They got Michigan, at Purdue, home against Maryland, at Ohio State, home against Penn State coming up. Yeah. If they're 10 wins by the end of the year, then Mel Tucker for LSU.
Yeah,
okay?
Right. Yeah.
But right now it's 7-0. For a guy that I believe has a losing record as a head coach, I mean, can we let him finish the season first before we anoint Mel Tucker as the next head coach at LSU? Guy, I'm sorry, he's got a 14-12 record now because of this season. So he went 5-7 in Colorado in one season at Colorado. He was 2-5 at Michigan State last year, which I don't fault him for that because he took over during the COVID year.
And it was any win-loss record last year for the Big Ten specifically because of the way that was handled.
Yep,
you throw out good or bad.
Especially a first-year coach.
Yeah, that
had no spring ball.
It was handled so poorly by the leadership. So poorly.
But first full year, he's gone 7-0. I like it. Right. I like it. He's coached in the South. He's recruited in the SEC. You know, I think he was Kirby Smart's defensive coordinator, Georgia, from 16 to 18. He was their D coordinator the year they played for the title. He was at Alabama for a year in 2015, a year that Alabama won the national title. He was a defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's going to be able to sell recruiting, right? And he's a Northern guy who's coached in the South. He was with the Jaguars for a while. So I'm really curious to see how serious they look at him prior to the season ending. That's going to be really interesting. Now, again, they're not going to make a hire during the season. I don't see Mel Tucker leaving Michigan State in the middle of the season.
Yeah, right?
That's not going to happen.
No.
But James Franklin's another popular name.
Well, he's a popular name supposedly for the USC job too.
That's why I think it's more of a media thing than it is. I think that's James Franklin. You want to get my opinion on that, Vince?
Sure.
Tell me if you agree with this. I think that's James Franklin's agent putting feelers out so he can either say, is there a job I really like, but more so, is it a situation where I can go to Penn State and say, hey, USC and LSU are after me. I need this pay raise for me. I need this pay raise for my staff, and we need to upgrade this something.
Right. We need to do this, and this. Like, here's my checklist. Let's make it happen.
Right. Now, I have also heard by some, and this is like someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone, right? So this is like real far move. But James Franklin doesn't exactly love it at Penn State. I think James Franklin's an overrated coach. I would take Mel Tucker.
You think that. Yeah.
I would take Mel Tucker before I take James Franklin. Because I think at least Mel Tucker's a good coach who knows how to coach. James Franklin's a hype man for me. That's what he is. He's a great recruiter and motivator.
Yeah, he is a good recruiter.
He's a very good coach. He's a horrible game day coach.
He's a good recruiter.
Horrible game day coach, in my opinion.
Do you put him in the same breath as the Georgia head coach?
Kirby's a better game day coach than James Franklin.
Okay.
If that gives you any say on how I think what I think of James Franklin, I think Brian Kelly blows James Franklin away as a game day coach.
Okay.
If I'm LSU, I'd take Brian Kelly over James Franklin. That tells you what I think of James Franklin. Because here's the thing. You can't just be a recruiter in the SEC.
No, you're right.
You got to be able to coach. You have to be able to coach. And Kirby's a bad game day coach, but I do think Kirby's a good game week coach.
Okay.
I think Kirby's a bad game day coach. James Franklin would not be a guy that I would want. Dave Aranda's a guy that I would definitely want to look at because he's recruited that school well. He was their D coordinator when it won a title. The question is, Vince, does he have enough experience for you?
Right.
I mean, he's second year as a head coach, right? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Dave Aranda? And look, think about it. Mel Tucker's got one more season on Dave Aranda as a head coach. That's it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, and then the next one on the list would be Joe Brady, who has 0.
He's not coming back to college.
Okay.
I mean, everybody mentions that because they're hoping, but he hated recruiting. Everyone that I know at LSU said he hated recruiting.
See, that's important to know, and I didn't know that.
He was there for 1 year to do a job to get back to being in the NFL. Plus, he's going to be a head coach in the NFL soon.
I would agree with that because there's going to be so many openings. There's 6 to 8 openings every year in the NFL. So, I mean, he's going to have every opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL. You're absolutely right.
Yep. Here's a name that I've Ben brings this one up. What are your thoughts on Mario Cristobal? And if you were his agent, what would you do with this?
Well, look, if I'm any head coach's agent, I'm floating their name for any major opening. That's how you get pay raises. Yeah. No question. I mean, I would definitely float his name. What do you think?
If I'm LSU, I'm looking at Mario Cristobal. If I'm Mario Cristobal, I'm looking at LSU to get a pay raise and more stuff out of Oregon.
Yeah.
I don't think LSU is the job people think it is. I think it's a good job. I think it's a very good job, but it's not an elite job. Yes, the per capita talent in Louisiana is really good, but I think it's a very unrealistic fan. They've now fired 2 head coaches that weren't that far removed from national championships.
That's true.
Or championship appearances. I mean,
there's a lot less pressure at Oregon than there is at LSU. Gosh, yes. I mean,
and I would argue the resources are better. The league is easier.
Yeah.
And
your path to the college football playoff is so much clearer at Oregon than it is at LSU.
Yeah. and you're in a division with Alabama, Auburn,
Right. That's what I'm
now
saying.
Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Like,
Right.
I'm sorry. And there's all that stuff going around about the Title IX stuff and some of the really bad things that have happened off the field. That program's going to probably get a hammer here soon in some ways. The basketball program's been under serious NCAA investigation. Like, I don't know if that's a situation I would want to touch. I would, however, definitely want to touch it from the standpoint of getting my name associated with it. So that way I could go back to Oregon and say, hey, this $4.4 million I'm making ain't getting it done.
Yeah, right.
This coaching assistant money pool that I have for my assistants ain't getting it done. If you guys want me to commit to you, then you need to be serious about committing to me.
Get Phil Knight on the horn. It's time.
Otherwise,
to
I'm going to either take the LSU job or I'm letting my alma mater know that I'm interested in coming home if they get rid of Manny Diaz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good point.
Because he's a Miami guy.
I didn't realize he was a Miami guy.
Yeah. Played at Miami. He's from Miami. So that's what I would do. But yeah, I mean, I would seriously look at that. And I'll tell you another guy that LSU should look at, but I don't think they will because I don't think their boosters are smart enough to do this, as we've seen from every other coaching hire process they've gone through since Nick Saban, obviously. A little different world back then.
Yeah.
Billy Napier at Louisiana Lafayette.
I
mean, he's an Alabama guy, right? And he's done a pretty good job there. I mean, they were ranked last year. I mean, they've had a better record than LSU the last 2 years. But he was at Alabama from 13 to 16, was the OC at Arizona State in 2017, and he's been at Louisiana. He took over in 2018. They went 7-7. The next 2 years they went 11-3. They went 10-1, and this year they're 5-1, and their only loss was a season opening loss to Texas this year. So to me, that's a dude I'm looking at if I'm LSU. I just don't think they're smart enough to do that.
Yeah, they won't. LSU
want the
wants
name.
to make a splash,
right? They want the name,
and the same can be said for USC. They want to. They're not going to dip down like that. Dip down, you know what I mean? They're not going to do that. And is it the same pool of candidates for USC that it is for LSU right now?
Man, I don't know who USC is going to look at
because that's
a whole different animal. A whole different animal. I've heard Lane Kiffin's name thrown around. Why would you leave Ole Miss to go to LSU? My point is
that's a lateral move to me.
Well, it's an upgrade from the program at LSU is better, but you got a nice thing going there. And if I mean, he doesn't have to win a title at Ole Miss, but if he goes 5-5 and then he's 4-3 the next year, he ain't getting fired 2 years after winning a title at Ole Miss like LSU.
Right. He'll have a job forever.
Yeah, he's a king there. He can act however he wants because when he does, it's like this. If you do something at Ole Miss, it's funny. Lane Kiffin, the Lane Train. You do it at Notre Dame, they're hammering you every single day.
Right.
You do it at LSU, they're hammering you every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
You act like PJ Fleck acts at Minnesota. Oh, he's so quirky. Look at him spring down the field. You do that at Ohio State. Does this clown not know he's at Ohio State?
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? Like, that's how I would be, to be honest with him. But, and there's just such a greater microscope there.
Yeah.
You can do whatever the heck you want at Ole Miss, and they're going to put everything you do under the rug.
Oh, you could say the same thing about Oregon, right? I mean, it's the same principle. Right.
Yep.
I agree.
I'm not taking that job. I mean, I don't know. Can you even think of a legitimate – I mean, James Franklin's a popular name. Who else is out there? I'm hearing like Luke Fickell. Is that really a splashy hire for USC?
See, I think USC is going to potentially pull down from the NFL.
But who?
I don't know.
Because here's the funny thing. Everybody talks about how great of a job USC is. When was the last time USC made a splashy hire? Like of a legitimately good coach.
That was good when he got there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, you could say Pete Carroll. They didn't want Pete Carroll. He was like their fourth or fifth option.
Right.
When was the last time USC hired a good coach? Meaning like a guy that was already established, a name, because they wanted Chris Peterson twice. He turned him down both times. Like people keep like Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher's been retired from the NFL for how many years now? Jeff Fisher's not coming to USC. Even if he does, that's great for Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
I mean, like
was Robinson anything before he went to USC?
First time. I mean, talking about John Robinson.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second time
you're going before my time of really. So I was wondering what you thought about that. I don't know.
He was better the first time. I mean, he was the OC at USC for 2 years. I'm looking at his resume, and then he was with the Raiders for a year. So he wasn't really an established guy the first time.
Okay.
Did a good job, obviously, won a title.
Yeah.
But he took over a pretty good situation, if I remember correctly. I believe he took over here. I'm gonna look it up. He took over for John McKay. Right.
McKay,
So he replaced a legend.
Yeah.
He inherited a pretty good situation. USC had won 2 titles in the 4 years before he took over at USC, including 2 years. So they won in 72, 74. He took over in 76.
Gotcha.
Right. And so this is what buddies of mine have explained. They went 11-1 his first year, 8-4, 12-1, won a title, then 11-0-1. The next 3 years, they went 8-2-1, 9-3, 8-3, and didn't have any top 10 finishes. And then his second go around at USC, he was not good.
Gotcha.
He went 8. That was during Lou's tenure. It was 93 to 97. And then, of course, he was the head coach for the Rams for a little bit. And that was between the 2 USC jobs. So, I mean, again, he wasn't an established guy either.
Right.
So, I mean, it's like they always think they're going to get this great coach, and it never happens. Right? I mean, because it's not a great job. There's a lot of things that go along with being the coach at USC that you don't want if you're a coach who cares about discipline and control of your program.
Do you think it's a better job now that there's a pro team there?
No, I think it's a worse job.
You think it's a worse job because you're not the pro team that's there?
Because at least when the teams left LA, you could say, hey, we're the only game in town.
Sure. I was thinking more of along the lines of
apathetic fan base.
I was thinking more of it along the lines of you could fly under the radar a little bit and have some time to try to get it under control.
I get that. That makes sense. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, especially. But see, the problem is the Chargers are doing pretty good right now.
Right.
And I don't know how many people in LA care about the Chargers.
No, you're not wrong.
And if they're still Raiders fans,
the Raiders are in Vegas.
Started 3-0, but they might still be Raiders fans.
I got you.
All the Bronco fans that were coming up to me like, "Hey, look what Teddy Bridgewater's doing the first game. They haven't done jack since they're 3-3 now. They just lost at home to the Raiders, who just fired their coach like 2 days ago. Oh, it's hilarious. So ridiculous.
Yeah,
but I mean, I don't know who in the NFL would take that job.
Yeah,
like what good NFL coach is going to want to say, "Yeah, I'll go back to college and have to recruit."
Depends on how much the check
deal
is.
with NIL. This is the thing about the NFL. If you're going to have to deal with all these entitled athletes getting, and I'm using the stereotype entitled athletes, like the perception.
Sure.
If I have to deal with athletes getting paid, I'm going to actually go with real professionals.
Right. Where there's actually oversight and there's, and
all we got to do
in
is
theory, some maturity.
Right.
Right. And you're not dealing with recruiting.
Right.
That's the thing about college coming from the NFL. You're adding a heck of a lot to your plate. It just isn't X's and O's.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's recruiting, it's school, it's all of those different things. And you're not able to just focus on football, and you're not dealing with adults. You're still dealing with kids, immature kids who now have money in their pocket, which adds a whole other. Yeah, no, I get it, man. I get it.
Yes. This is a good question right here from Ben. Would John Harbaugh, not a great coach, leave Michigan for USC, has experience on the West Coast, Stanford, and the 49ers? First of all, I gotta push back on the whole John Harbaugh not being a great coach thing. I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit on that. I think John Harbaugh's a heck of a coach. Guy's got a Super Bowl ring. He has reinvented himself 3 times.
Do you think he meant John Harbaugh?
Yeah.
He's not at Michigan.
Well, I'm thinking he's thinking his brother's. He's mistaking his brother's resume for. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't even see the Michigan part. Would Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah, I think that's
Michigan for you.
That's what I think he means.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh. No way in heck Jim Harbaugh is going there. Sorry, he did flip it, Jim.
Yeah.
Would John Harbaugh be someone I would look at if I'm USC? Yes,
absolutely.
Regarding John, I've heard there's only one. That's all I'm gonna say. There's only one college job that he would consider taking,
and it may be where his kid goes to school.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Jim Harbaugh. Oh God, I pray USC, please hire Jim Harbaugh. Please. So I saw John just ignored the rest of the question. That's my fault, Ben. Because everything else you said made it clear it was Jim. But oh my gosh, I pray that USC brings Jim Harbaugh. Could you imagine that sideshow with what is already a sideshow
Oh my
at
goodness.
USC? That'd be so much fun.
In LA, like with the
Oh my
media
gosh.
that he couldn't control and like
Oh my gosh. I mean, imagine the first time he tries to tell boosters they can't be at practice.
oh my goodness gracious.
Have fun with that.
Yeah, I would
Have fun with that.
You want to talk about Lane Kiffin and get your popcorn ready? Yeah,
Yes.
I'll be getting
Oh
my
gosh,
popcorn ready
that'd
for
be
that one.
I'd consider no, I'd never consider going to LA. But if I didn't hate the notion of having to live in California, I would want to cover USC just to enjoy that.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of say this now, Vince. Since you went ahead and threw where his daughter goes to college, you have to say that now.
Well, yeah. Well, Larry took care of it for me. He's got a daughter that goes to Notre Dame.
Now, is she a freshman now?
She's young. I know she's young, and I think she's on an athletic scholarship.
Oh yeah, she's like I think she plays lacrosse.
Is it lacrosse? That's what I was going to say.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is accurate. Are you looking up the roster?
I am. Okay. I don't remember if she was like she's a freshman. Yeah, she's a freshman now.
Okay. Yeah.
No, she's a sophomore now. I'm sorry. She's a sophomore now.
Better get that train going, baby. Come on.
Yep.
Now he would be pretty dang near top of my list if there was a head coaching vacancy.
Yeah. There'd be two guys at the very you and I had a long conversation about this the other day.
Yeah.
But yeah, he'd be one of 5 guys that I would call if Brian Kelly decided to leave.
Right.
Because again,
now we're not advocating for that. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
We're just talking to talk.
They're not going to fire Brian Kelly. But if Brian Kelly decided after this year, you know what? I hate the media. I'm done. I've accomplished everything I accomplished. I want to walk away.
Right. His golden parachute would be pretty nice too, by the way.
Right away. Yeah. So. Anyway, so that's it. So yeah, that LSU job, Vince, is interesting. I personally would push for Dave Aranda if I had to make it now. But honestly, I'm going to sit back and kind of start putting my list together, find out who's interested. But I'm not making a hard push until we get close to the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
This
is where you put the feelers out. Right. You kind of see that way. You're not looking like you're prostrating in front of anybody. Right. You want there to be mutual interest.
Yep.
For a job like this. Yes. And I do know, I'm sure that they want to go for a big name. I get it. But they're going to have to be smart about it. And that's why they're giving themselves this kind of time, which I think is smart, to be honest with you. If you know you're not bringing them back.
You know what I like about what they did? I like the fact that I never understood why USC didn't let Clay Helton keep coaching unless they wanted to give Dante Williams a sort of on the job.
Yeah, right.
Interview. Right. I like the fact that LSU said, and Ed Orgeron agreed to do it. I mean, it's a two-way thing. Good on you for letting the guy coach the rest of the year.
Yep.
And then now, because again, you don't have to worry about an interim coach doing well, and then all of a sudden, geez.
Now you got to consider him.
Keep that guy.
Yeah.
Let Coach O coach the year. Take the pressure off your entire program, and then take your time putting your thing together without all the rumors of, was he going to get fired? And
right.
I actually think LSU handled this well.
Yeah.
Because every time they lose, there's going to be the
hot seat.
Is he going to be fired? The hot seat's over, right? They turned it off. He's done.
Yeah.
But the team doesn't have to hear about it. They're not going to get asked about
it.
Being fired. They don't have to worry about playing for him. Because I would imagine the LSU players respect Coach O. I've never heard of players not respecting Coach O.
Right.
So he gets to finish the year out, and which is the right way to. I don't like firing a coach during the year if he hasn't done something wrong off the field.
Yeah, that
we know of.
I agree.
Let him finish the year out. Let him keep coaching the year, and then do your search. So I'm with you, Vince. I think that's now assuming they have to have some idea of who they're going to go after, and they have to have some idea of whether or not those coaches would or wouldn't be interested. I would imagine Mel Tucker is going to be interested in that job. I would imagine Dave Aranda is at least going to be willing to listen about that job. I imagine there's going to be several coaches that are going to be willing to at least listen.
Sure, I would.
Now, whether or not they would take it, different deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yep. So, anyway.
All right. I think that's
Joseph
it, right?
Said this. If they respect him, why are they hearing stories about they don't want to play for him? Respecting him and thinking he's doing the right things as a coach are different things. Like, I think they like him. I've never heard stories that they don't like him, but I think as the pressure has mounted, you're seeing a Coach O that's not handling it well. So, and then the other thing was Ron Ginther says, would Walker Howard consider Notre Dame now? I actually think Coach O being fired hurts Notre Dame's chances. at flipping Walker Howard, who's the quarterback commit at LSU, because now it's going to be a healthier situation. And here's
Right.
I want to leave with this, Vince.
Well, look, you've got the personnel in theory,
right,
to run what he wants to run. So it could be a quick turnaround, but it's not like he's not having success in the NFL right now.
Right.
And if it was the opposite, if they weren't playing well, then I would put more into that. But he's doing what he needs to do in the NFL right now, and they're pretty sure they're leading the West right now, and they're winning games that people didn't think they were going to win. So there's no wanting to leave right now.
I just don't think there's going to be a lot of NFL coaches that want to deal with what you have to deal with in college football right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I read an article the other day from The Athletic, I think it was, where it's like the era of the coach icon is dead and it's good for sports. I think it's absurd. I like the idea that coaches can't just get away with whatever nonsense they want to get away with, but it's not good that you don't have these faces of the program in college, because your roster turns over at such a high rate year after year. You need that stability of a head coach. This college football turning in the NFL where you fire guys every 2 years after you win a title, that's not good for the game. But but that's what college is turning into. Where in the past you say, what the nice thing about college is, if I go there and I win, I can be there for 20 years.
Yep.
That's not the case anymore.
Nope.
Notre Dame's the only place where that's the case now. As long as you win 9-10 games every year, you can stay as long as you want. You don't have to win a title. But everywhere else, you've got to win now. And if you start faltering for a year, you're gone.
Absolutely.
So if I'm going to do that, I might as well stay in the NFL and make more money and not have to deal with recruiting and class and boosters and all this other stuff. I just go coach. So you're just not gonna see that. You're not going to see head coaches. If you're going to hire somebody, it's going to be somebody who wants to get out because he sees the writing on the wall, or it's going to be some coordinator in the NFL.
Right.
It's not going to be like it used to be. So that's my 2 cents. So it's good astute observations, Vince. All right, that is going to do it for today's show. We finally wrapped it up. I'm glad we were able to get some of this LSU stuff discussed, because it was gonna be a little challenging to fit that in the rest of the week. So
it would have been. That was fun.
Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Make sure you stay locked into IrishBreakdown.com. Sign up for the message board at boards@IrishBreakdown.com. Check out our merch store, because we've added some cool new things to the merch store. It's that blanket's still not in here. So you guys are going to want to check that out. Fun show today.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed myself, Vince. Thank you for joining me. I know usually this is you and Sean's time, but I wanted to kind of get in and talk about football today. So I appreciate you guys letting me do that on my show. So I appreciate everybody being with us today. A really good crowd today, Vince. A lot of people in the forum today. It was like a little low for the first 5 minutes, and also boom, took off.
It was great.
So going to be a fun week. Look, they get to play Southern Cal week, man.
Southern Cal, baby. That's how we refer to them around here.
It's going to be a fun week. This is a big game for Notre Dame in a lot of different ways. I'm looking forward to it. So it's going to be a real fun week. So make sure you all are locked in. If you're listening via podcast, hit that 5-star review for Vince. Brian, you all have a great rest of your day. Take care. We'll talk to you very, very soon.